Hello and welcome to yet another episode of Space Week Viking TV. I'm Lynn Sherr, and it is my pleasure and my honor to be hosting and interviewing the incredibly accomplished and experienced astronauts who are going to be our guides to the wonders and the occasional annoyances of living and working in space. They have been there and they know. And they are much honored for their service and their courage. And now they're going to share that very privileged knowledge with all the rest of us. Let me briefly introduce each one. First, the woman responsible for getting us all together and for keeping the flame burning, Dr. Anna Fischer. Viking knows her as the godmother of the ship Viking Orion. Anna was one of the original 6 women selected as NASA astronauts in 1978. And she made additional history as the first mother to fly in space. Anna's post-shuttle career at NASA included work on the International Space Station and on the Orion exploration spacecraft. Anna has lived in space for 8 days. Our next Fisher, sorry, I'll let them tell you the Fish jokes when we get there. Our next one is just retired Colonel Jack Fischer. Jack launched on a Russian rocket to the International Space Station in 2017 and performed 2 spacewalks. After 9 years at NASA, Jack returned to the U.S. Air Force to work with its Space Command. He is currently in the private sector with Collins Aerospace. Jack Fischer lived in space for 136 days, and he was outside of the spacecraft in actual space during his EVA for 7 hours. Dr. Richard Linnehan is a veterinarian who has applied his work in life sciences to research on applications in space. Rick flew on 4 shuttle flights from 1996 to 2008, and from them he did 6 EVAs or extravehicular activities or spacewalks. Today, Rick is working with NASA's Human Research Program, and he joins us, just like Anna and Jack, from Houston. Rick lived in space for 59 days, his spacewalk time, 45 hours. Finally, Barbara Morgan got to space after a career as a public school teacher in Idaho. She was the backup to Krista McAuliffe for NASA's Teacher in Space program. When shuttle flights were suspended after the Challenger explosion, Barbara returned to the classroom but submitted her application to become an astronaut. She got there in 1998 and she flew in 2007, helping construct the International Space Station. Today, Barbara joins us from Boise, where she continues to work with educational programs. And Barbara Morgan lived in space for 14 days. Welcome to all of you and to our wonderful audience. And by the way, we know you have questions and we will get to them during the course of the interview and after we're finished as well. But let's get started. Our theme is living in space, and I want to begin with training, technical, physical, mental, and how it differs depending on where in space you're going, whether you're going to the shuttle, whether you're going to the space station, or whether you're going on a spacewalk. So, Barbara, I actually want to start with you. You effectively trained twice. Once when you were the backup to Krista, and then later with your own crew for the shuttle. Give us a sense of the preparation for shuttle back then.
Well, back then I wasn't training as an astronaut. I was training as a citizen in space or a space flight participant. And so our training for that was really to work on the education activities that Krista was going to be doing in space, and to learn as much as we could about the space shuttle and what we were doing in space at the time to share with students all over the country. And we were also training to make sure that we were good, safe crew members and not getting in the way of our astronauts on board and the work that they were doing. So
how about though, Barbara, as a citizen and a citizen in space, what did they tell you about what to expect about flying?
Well, that's a tough question with a lot of answers to it. It's not a tough question, but there's a lot of answers to it. So You learn, and you do this as a beginning astronaut too, what it's like to be weightless by flying on an aircraft that flies a series of parabolas up and down, where you experience weightlessness as you go over the top of the parabolas for about 30 seconds a shot. And we also fly in high performance jet aircraft, the T-38s, where we learn how to be good crew members with communication and aviation, but also to experience high Gs so that you understand what the Gs are going to be like when you launch into space.
So Rick and Jack, you two both hit the trifecta, shuttle, station, and EVAs. How does the training differ from all three? Rick, you want to start? What's the difference in the way you're taught to adapt your body or what to expect for all three of those things?
Well, good question, Lynn. And I'm going to let Jack extrapolate on the really long duration, because my longest time at any one shuttle flight was about 20 days, 19, 20 days. But even within that time period, and I think Anna and Barbara will attest to this, you notice big differences in your body, specifically your muscles, in terms of how much they atrophy in your legs. You have a fluid shift that occurs once you go into a micro G, zero G environment, which just means that the fluid in your body, which is normally held down in your legs by gravity and your heart pumps it around. If you've ever seen those kind of simulations where a fluid floats in a big sphere in zero G, well, if you can imagine in your body, that fluid wants to do the same thing. So it kind of shifts up into your upper torso and chest and head. And everybody who goes into space feels really stuffed up. They have like a massive head cold for a couple days, and you're on Sudafed or Afrin, and you're taking Motrin or aspirin for the headaches. And it takes a few days to download that fluid, get rid of the fluid you don't need. And eventually, even for a period of a couple weeks, you'll come to some type of steady state where your body adapts to that environment and you feel better. And then you can go about, your daily chores like EVAs or working. But for someone like Jack, who spent a lot more time at one time in space, I'll let him talk about that. But there's a lot of things that they did up there that don't happen on a shuttle crew in terms of exercise and other metabolic kind of things that they do to stay healthy on station for long durations.
But before I let we go to Jack, which I do want to do, how did they train you, if at all, to deal with that fluid shift? Is there anything you can do on Earth to get ready for that?
There really isn't. I mean, people ask that about EVA, how do you train to be in zero G? And outside of flying for maybe 30-second parabolas on the Vomit Comet, where you're basically going in, like this, up and down in an airplane, you're floating and all that, you're not going to get any long-term training in zero G. The closest you can come to that is when you're training in the pool at the Neutral Buoyancy Lab in Houston in the EVA suit, the EMU, where you're neutrally buoyant. So you're actually floating underwater in a water column and you're weighed out. But even then, you still weigh what you weigh. The suit is like 350 pounds, and you're just fighting all that. So there's really no way to train. You train as close as you can to the real thing. And then when you get there, it's like, so this is what it's like. And you kind of remember everything that is important, and you kind of get rid of everything that was negative training, and your body just learns to exist up there.
That's great. And Jack, so talk to us about long duration. There you were up on the station. Were you trained for it? Is it what Rick was just describing, or is there a different way to deal with being in space for more than a couple of days?
I think one of my mentors once said that flying on the shuttle is a sprint, and the space station is the marathon. And that's totally true. If you watch the shuttle crews, and I never got to fly on the shuttle, they were humping from the second the engines cut off until they came back in the atmosphere. So they are very tightly controlled, and specifically what's going to happen every second of the day. So You can almost train, for instance, their spacewalks are planned, and you know exactly what you're going to do. So they are so good, and you watch a shuttle EVA and you're just in amazement because they've thought through where every tool is going to be, and you know, you'll have somebody on the arm that's you know, done that a million times, and they're just very efficient. For the long duration cruise, they kind of make us jacks of all trade, master of none, and we just kind of have to figure it out. So you'll see maybe not quite as efficient when we go outside or grab something with the arm, just because the breadth of what we have to do to stay up there and react to whatever comes in a 6 month or longer increment. It's just a different, the training is the same. It's a much different focus because you have to be up there for so much longer to deal with things. Rick was mentioning about physical impacts that you have in orbit. And, you know, we've gotten very good because we're trying to get better at keeping the human body and the human system working all the way to Mars and back. And on a short duration shuttle flight, you can probably get away without doing some high impact resistant and resistive exercise and come back and your bones are still okay. If you do that a long duration flight, you'll come back with 20% less bone mass. So we are militant about 2.5 hours of working out a day, vitamin D supplements, and understanding shifts in vision. You know, Rick talked about what your blood wants to do. Well, it floats on up into your head, makes you stuffy, but it also squishes the back of your eyeball and can permanently change your vision. So understanding the effects and who and how those effects are going to manifest across the crew is a big part of long duration flight, and it's what we spend a lot of time on.
And this is so different, obviously, from the kind of training you had, because when you flew, they didn't know that much. The shuttle was new. Yes, there had been other shuttle flights before you, but once you were in the shuttle and once you got into orbit, what did you feel? What did it feel like to you to be in microgravity at that point?
Oh, first of all, let me just say that, you know, the training when I flew was far less mature than the training that I saw for a lot of my colleagues later on. But that was also one of the fun aspects because, for example, on our flight, we were going to bring back these 2 huge satellites that no one had ever done before. And basically, we worked with our trainers and our flight controllers to help develop the concept, the procedures, and so forth. And so in a way, that was really fun. We were given really a lot of responsibility to participate with. So that was just a real difference that I noticed from talking to what Barbara and Rick and Two Fish are saying. But, you know, once you got on orbit, again, you just talk to all your friends and sort of know what to, try to mentally know what to expect. The thing that I remember most about adapting to weightlessness, and I've only heard one of my other astronaut colleagues describe it this way, Karen Nyberg, and she had almost the exact same reaction I did, which was, you know, for about 2 days, you don't feel really great, or at least many of us don't, and I certainly didn't. And you try to stay oriented in the same way that you did in the training in a 1G environment. You don't try to go upside down or do anything that would make you feel sick. And about the 3rd day, I felt great again and was ready to eat and really felt like I was starting to adapt. But it wasn't till the 4th day that it was like a switch went off in my brain where all of a sudden, wherever my feet were, that was the floor, and whatever was above me was the ceiling. And it was a real dramatic shift, like I describe it, like a switch being thrown. I don't know if other people felt it, but like I said, I was listening to an interview with Karen Nyberg, who was one of the women astronauts who flew much later. And it was very interesting to hear her describe it the same way that I did.
I have to say that two extreme comments that I heard when I was covering the program. Sally Ride always said famously, it was the most, after she returned from her first mission, it was the most fun I think I've ever had. Steve Hawley, on the other hand, was often quoted as saying that it was sort of, it got in the way. Being in space got in the way. He couldn't get things done because you had to deal with microgravity and things floating around. I'm curious, just quickly, how about you folks? Did it get in the way? Was it fun? Anna just described finally getting to a point where she was comfortable with it. Tell me about that. Anybody?
Well, I'll go. I thought it was like, I told my wife when I got to orbit, I thought it was a burrito of awesomeness smothered in awesome sauce. And I was like a 12-year-old kid on 2 cappuccinos for the first time in Disneyland, and it never went away.
What did you love about it, Jack?
Oh, I love the view. I love floating. I love playing with my food. I love feeling like part of a worldwide team actually doing something for humanity. If I could have had my wife up there and my dog, I'd have stayed. It was awesome.
That's great. What about the rest of you? How about you, Rick?
I'd have to echo a lot of what Jack said. The first time, I was the last guy in my class to fly. And so, everyone else flew, and I'm like, gee, am I ever going to get a chance here? And then when I finally got up in space, it was the longest shuttle flight to date. And the first couple of days, you pinch yourself, you're floating around, you go, oh man, I felt lousy, because I had the headache and the fluid shift, and I'm like, I don't know if I could do this for 14 days. And then day 3 clicks in, day 4, and there's just stuff happening, and it's cool. And the big thing for me was, I love looking out the window. We didn't have a lot of opportunity to do it, but I slept. I drove them nuts because they were trying to get me out of the flight deck all the time because I wanted to sleep up there. I was looking out. They finally told me, get down below to the mid deck. You're in the way. So yeah, I loved it. And for me, the big thing was looking down at your planet and realizing, hey man, I'm off the planet. I left, and I didn't want to come back, and it made me realize just how important it is to have a human brain and some eyes in space looking back at the planet, and then how important it was, to get to the other parts of the solar system and do the same thing. So I was sold after the first flight, and it's a lot of work, just like Jack says. You're rushing to get up and you're rushing to go back to bed because they have you on a sleep shift schedule on the shuttle. So you're always tired and you're always busy, but at the same point, the same time, you think about it, who else got to do this? How lucky was I to get to go up and, leave the planet and be in space, aboard a space shuttle. So it's something that, it's hard to remember certain aspects of it because it all blends together because you're so busy. But the whole memory itself, being part of it and doing it was just something that, I'm really glad I had an opportunity to do.
But I suspect there is a little bit of a bittersweet aspect to it. Certainly, Anna, in your case, you had what, a 1-year-old? Kristen was 1 year, not even 1 when you flew, is that right?
She was 14 months, and yeah, it was just like the most fun experience though. Even like Rick said, even if you didn't feel great the first 2 days, the being weightless is just an amazing experience. But like Two Fish said, if I could have had my family with me, I would have wanted to stay as long as I could because it was just such a unique experience and looking at our beautiful planet. But it was really hard to leave Kristen. But now that I realize that older kids are even more harder to keep track of, I think perhaps the fact that she was little was perhaps a blessing because I would have worried a lot more if she were a teenager. I didn't realize it at the time. I wasn't smart enough at the time, but in retrospect, I think it was probably a good thing she was just 14 months old.
Let's talk a little bit about what life is like once you're up there. Barbara, sleeping, eating, describe it.
Well, it was interesting. So Anna and Rick talked about how you feel your head's full at the beginning, and I don't know if people really understand there is no up or down in space. And so once your body does get used to it, up is wherever your head is. So if your head's this direction, that's your new ceiling. And one of the big surprises for me, all crews, when they come back, we spend time sharing with each other. And I think Anna mentioned this, some tips and what it was like. So we share as much as we can with the rest of our colleagues to make sure everybody has a chance to understand before they go up. And I had kind of a surprise that I had not heard, but I was just not hungry the first couple of days. Peristalsis shuts down, so the way your food moves through your body, that shuts down for a couple of days till it gets used to being in microgravity, and then everything starts working again. Well, for me, I just wasn't hungry, but I knew I needed to stay hydrated because we were getting rid of all that extra body fluid, and you need to make sure you're still hydrated. So I would have some soups or some drinks, juices, and I was so surprised that they would go to about here, and that's as far as they would go, and I was full. So I was full from here to here, and it just didn't go the rest of the way. And I thought, well, this is going to be pretty interesting if this is going to be like this for 14 days. And then also the first couple days, I felt like I was upside down, no matter which way my head was. And once everything started working, and for me, like Anna and Rick, it was about flight day 3, and then flight day 4, things really worked well, and it got very natural. Then that's when it became really, really, really fun.
So let's get to the nitty gritty. What kind of food did you eat?
So because your head changes shape. I don't know if you see all of us on orbit, our heads are going to look a lot rounder. I do not have a round face, but it actually looks more like a normal round face when I'm in space. But it also changes the shape of your tongue, your taste buds, and so food tends to be a little bit bland. So we like the spicy stuff. And I think my favorite was the beef stroganoff. It's dehydrated, you add hot water to it, and you mush it up, and once it's rehydrated, you eat it. And it was nice and spicy, so that was really good. My crewmates loved shrimp cocktail. That seems to be one of our crew's favorites. And for some reason, I just didn't like the shrimp cocktail very much. I'm kind of spoiled, and I like really, really fresh shrimp, and they were not fresh. But in fact, I took some home for my kids to try, and they gave some to our dog, and our dog spit it out. But because my crewmates love shrimp cocktail, I made sure we all kind of put our own menus together with our nutritionists, and I made sure and took up a bunch of shrimp cocktail because it's really fun to share your food with your friends on orbit.
So Jack, long duration, what did you miss while you were on the station?
I'm not horribly picky about food. So I think that's one of the mistakes that I made on my mission. If I was to go again, I would understand that in a long duration mission, some people love food. That's their love language, and you got to be able to speak it. And I found out that Peggy loves chocolate, and so I saved every bit of chocolate so Peggy would have chocolate. And Schroeder and I loved hot sauce, so it was the same thing. And you can put that on anything, and it tastes fine. Different people react different ways, and it becomes more and more important the longer you're up there for meal planning than it was for a shorter shuttle mission, just because people get tired of things. And I didn't put enough thought into that process because I'm just kind of a garbage grinder, give me the leftovers. But you're not up there alone, and you want to make sure that your crewmates are getting taken care of too. So I could have planned better so that they would have had more of the things that they liked. And that was an important lesson for me. Overall, it's good. And you get little care packages every now and again. So it's not so bad.
Not so bad. All right.
Lynn, can I jump in for just a moment?
Sure, Barbara.
because Jack mentioned Fyodor, who was his crewmate, and Fyodor happened to be years earlier the commander of the International Space Station when my crew and I flew up to the International Space Station. And a couple weeks before we took off, we got a call from Clay Anderson saying, "Hey guys, can you please bring up a bunch of Kona coffee because Fyodor and love it." And we've run out. So we took up a bunch of Kona coffee and we kind of packed it into 2 bags because it sounded like Clay was the one who really, really wanted it. But so we packed it in 2 bags so Clay could share one with Fyodor and Oleg and have one to kind of stuff away for himself. And this is an example of how wonderful these crews are and how working together makes such a big difference. So we got up in orbit and handed Clay those 2 bags, floated over with the 2 bags and said, we kind of explained why we had divided up into 2 bags. And Clay said, well, thank you very much, but they're both going to Fyodor and Oleg, which was terrific. Yeah. And Fyodor and Oleg also, they loved our American tortillas. And so we made sure, we had taken up a bunch of them, but we made sure that we ate very, very few of them. We had a wonderful last meal together with wonderful Russian pâtés spread on these American tortillas with some sriracha sauce. So we had international burritos. And but we ate very few of them because we left as many of them as we could behind because they were going to be, Fyodor and Oleg and Clay were going to be up there a couple more months, and we wanted to make sure they had enough tortillas to get them through the rest of their mission.
That's great. Okay, so we all know that the first question most kids ask when you guys go out on tour is, how do you go to the bathroom in space? Who's got the best routine for describing it?
Very carefully.
Very carefully? Is that what you said, Anna? So Sally used to say, it's easy, she said, it's like sitting on a vacuum cleaner.
Oh, I disagree. It's not easy, but it is like sitting on a vacuum cleaner.
Okay. And then a friend of mine asked me today, well, what do they do when they're up there for a long time and it gets clogged up? You fix it, right?
Oh, yes.
We had lots of problems.
I was the plumber. So, Peggy would do more science because she's the scientist. And then I was the, plumber. I got pretty good at fixing that toilet, but you got to have it working.
That's for sure. I feel as if I read something that they were working on a new version of a toilet for long duration for a trip to Mars. Is that right? Can you explain it?
I can. My company built it. It's the new toilet it's a little bit more efficient, lighter, smaller, so that we can adapt it for putting it in the Orion vehicle for long duration missions elsewhere. And then it's more suited to female waste than the current toilet. So it's got a lot of new features and hopefully a next generation that'll make it a little more efficient pooping in space.
Let's move on to something that is very relevant to today, and I know changed during the time from when Anna flew and Barbara and to you guys, and which is how you get your news from Earth. Anna, just briefly describe how you would get news when you flew in what are now the early days.
Oh gosh, we really didn't get very much news other than they would print up a daily message summary that was printed. It wasn't, on a computer or anything like that. And if there was any significant news event that occurred, they might lead off with that. But basically for those 8.5, 9 days, we were pretty well isolated. We only had the air to ground loops. So we didn't get to talk with our families. We didn't get to do anything that was other than being totally professional. So that we really, we would ask questions if somebody wanted to know a football game or something like that. You really had to ask, but there was no no means of getting things yourself independent of mission control. So you really did feel very isolated in that sense, but you know, as Two Fish mentioned and everyone else, you're so busy on those on the shuttle flights that you really don't have a lot of time to think about that, or at least we certainly didn't on our flight.
Rick, how about you during your missions? How did you get news?
Well, it's like Anna said, in my first flight, we didn't. We got just a daily summary. We had one of those like thermal impact printers, you know, like an old fax machine, and it was noisy as all heck. And you know, I used to want to try and turn it off, and you go, no, turn it off. We got to have the daily, you know, the daily mail. So there wasn't much there, and you're actually asked, you know, hey, if something bad happens or something, you know, that's notable, do you want to hear about it or not hear about it while you're up there? So you're pretty isolated. And then as my flights progressed, the second flight, we had a little bit more bandwidth in terms of being able to talk to people and more time. The third flight, we had, you know, email, albeit very slow and very clunky. And then on the last flight where I was on station, you know, you had a satellite phone. You could make calls and talk to your friends and family at a certain times. You had email, so it was like you know, warp speed from what the first flight was.
And Jack, it must have been by the time you flew your license. Tell us what did you have constant? I mean, could you watch television? Could you watch television news?
No, we had rudimentary internet, so you could kind of get some stuff, but it was really painful to get on. They could upload programs. So if there was like a football game or something you really wanted to watch, Mission Control would upload that, but certainly much better capabilities than when Anna flew. You know, it just keeps progressing, and I know they have better now. I called my wife almost every night, so you can make phone calls. We had video conferences once a week, you know, different PR events, and they got up to 4 space-to-ground communication links, data channels. I mean, they continually evolve this station to be more of what it should be, which is a platform for science and getting more and more done and more efficient at it as we progress. So it just continues to evolve, and it's better than it's ever been and not as good as it will be.
I must say, talking and certainly hearing Anna and Rick say that at the beginning you felt like you were isolated. How did living in space prepare you, if at all, for the isolation during COVID-19? What did you learn to help you, and what can you pass on to other folks?
For me, you know, I think, the isolation, I think that it taught me to focus on what was more important to me, as opposed to the daily grind. If you have the constant contact with people and the constant barrage of news and information, you can use it almost as an excuse sometimes not to focus on the things that truly matter. Whereas when you have to choose, and you have to choose what data or what info or what you're going to spend that bandwidth on, for me, I always chose my wife, but you're going to choose stuff that's more important, and you're going to think about it a little bit more. I think that your interactions, and I hope that it comes out of this, because it sure hasn't seemed like it lately, but I hope that coming on the other side of COVID, we spend a little more time thinking about the interactions we have with people and make them count a little more. Understand that interaction is precious, and you need to put some more thought and care into how we treat other people. Hopefully that happens, but I'll let other folks talk.
Anybody else have any thoughts about your time there? Rick, you were not only in space for a long time, you did all those space walks. And I know you're busy while you're doing an EVA, but you're also sort of on your own in a way. Did it, any lessons from that for what we're going through now?
Yeah, you know, that's a good point. I hadn't thought about that with the COVID analogy, but if you wanna really be alone, picture yourself in your own little spacecraft, which is a spacesuit, floating in the pitch black on the other side of the, you know, when you're through the Terminator and it's black for 45 versus daylight, and you're in pitch black floating by yourself in a spacesuit. And that's pretty much probably as alone as any person's ever going to get. And I liked it. I got used to it. I mean, I really enjoyed it. And, you know, this whole COVID thing, I guess, has brought home the whole isolation. Jack picked up on it, talking about, you know, how people are treating each other. I think it taught me how to just kind of relax, being up in space, and accept the fact that this is my reality, this is where I am, and you make the best of it. And I think that's probably a good lesson to bring back home. It's like, you know, everyone, well, we want to be back to where we are. We want to do this. We don't want to be told what to do, but for the time being, it's just the way it is. And to get through this as efficiently as possible, you know, that's what we're going to have to do. Just relax, take it one day at a time.
That's great. We could talk forever, many things. We've got a bunch of questions. Let's try to get some quick answers to some of these. And let's get rid of this one. Anna, Jack, where did Two Fish come from? This is from Furman in Surrey. Where did Two Fish come from, and who is Two Fish?
I'll let you answer that.
I'm Two Fish. So I was the second fisher in my first fighter squadron, and we go through a naming ceremony, and at the end of the naming ceremony, Dr. Seuss sounded funny, so one fish, two fish. I've been Two Fish forever, but then when I came to NASA, and I had always thought it was so cool, because, you know, you always creep on all the bios of all the astronauts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, there's a fisher. This is so cool. It's a sign. And then I got to meet her, and she's like the nicest, coolest lady ever. And we got to go up to some robotic arm training in Canada for a couple weeks, and we were partnered up, and the folks we were with started calling us One Fish and Two Fish, and so Anna is the one fish. She's the original fish. I'm just a strap hanger that followed along, but the one and only Anna Fisher.
All right. Okay.
What's interesting is, you know, many of particularly the military astronauts all have little call signs, and some of the mission specialists acquired them as they went along, but for some reason along the way, I never got a call sign until Two Fish came along. So it was kind of nice to now have a call sign of One Fish, even if he does spell his name wrong with a C.
Okay. Question from Victoria in San Diego. Having said it takes about 3 days for your body to adapt to being in space, is it the same when you come back? What's the adaptation for back on Earth? Who wants to take that one?
Well, when we came back, I felt like an 800-pound gorilla when we landed. And when you come back, you know, Rick mentioned the fluid shifts that occur. And no matter how hard you try to get rehydrated for entry, they wanted us to drink a bunch of these little cups of water and all this salt. And I knew if I did that I was going to throw up on entry. So I did the best I could. But when we landed, I was definitely dehydrated and very lightheaded. And so there's the immediate effects. When you first come back, you feel very heavy, unsteady. And usually most people are relatively dehydrated and so forth. But all of that stuff tends to go away rather quickly for a short duration flight. For a short duration flight, I would say that I was pretty much back to normal by the next day after I landed, certainly by 2 days later. It's a lot different for the long duration cruise. So I'll let the other folks talk about that.
Jack, you want to do you're the longest duration we've got.
It depends on the person. For me, it was about a month. And most of that is flexibility. You get better and better at shutting off your vestibular. So it's harder and harder to turn it back on when you come back. I was doing a test where you stand on this board and then, they move it around and you kind of surf on this little board. And then they said, okay, close your eyes. And because you're so used to using your vision to kind of map out the environment, there isn't much degradation. You get back and the next day you're walking, but then you close your eyes and you look like one of those little dolls where you press the button and they just fall down. Your body doesn't know what to do. And flexibility is where it really hits you, because, to hear Anna Fisher say she felt like an 800-pound gorilla, it's 100% true. And Peggy, my crewmate, said, dude, you got to stretch. And I'm like, Peggy, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm like a space ballerina. Look at me, how flexible I am. It's so great. Well, that's because I didn't weigh anything. And then when that leg weighs 100 pounds, it feels like it weighs 10,000 pounds and you're made out of concrete. And it takes a long time with physical therapy to get your body back to normal and get your flexibility back. So that was the biggest challenge.
Let me move on. I know you all have great stories, but our time is limited. Theodore in Hamden, did the veterinarian have any animals with him in space, and are animals still brought in space? Rick, what can you tell us about the use of animals in space, what we can do for them, what they can do for us?
Well, on my first flight, we did have animals. We had a cage, specifically manufactured cage, that's been updated and upgraded, that they fly on station, and later flights, they house rats, rodents. And for this flight, they basically just went along for the ride and lived in their cage while they were up there with us. And we monitored them and looked at them and made sure they were watered and fed, but left them alone. And then when they got back, they were taken over by the PIs, their researchers, and they were studied. For my second flight, which was Neural Lab, STS-90, and it's probably the most ambitious life sciences flight NASA has done to date, and maybe ever will, because we had a space lab and we had, I think the count was over 2,000 life forms on board. I think about 1,700 of them were crickets, and then we had 4 big primates that most of the experiments were done on. That's us, namely us. A lot of the experiments we had to perform were on us, which wasn't all that popular. We flew fish, we flew a bunch of mice and rats, and it was basically Noah's Ark in space, menagerie. And then most shuttle flights now will transport or fly, I think, rodents up to the space station or back. And so there's animals have a long history with NASA, actually. I mean, a little bit of history here. The first astronauts, American astronauts, weren't human. If anyone knows about project, there's a couple Air Force projects and all that, but the famous Ham and Enos, who were chimps that flew before we did. And a lot of the people at Holloman Air Force Base said when they got back, they actually did better than the humans did when they went up the first time. So there's a lot of history there with animals in space. And what we use them for now is to look at the same kind of processes, disease, metabolic processes are going on in people. Things happen a lot faster, so to speak, in space. In other words, if you become osteoporotic and you're, earthbound female in your 80s, a lot of that bone leaching and calcium loss can happen to an astronaut in a much quicker interval, like say if they spend a year in space. And so astronauts make great models, as do the animals we fly with them, even shorter time periods. And we're able to fly smaller animals for a higher experimental number of N to look at these studies. But a lot of the disease processes and metabolic issues that happen to people as they age also occur in astronauts and animal models in space. And so we're able to look at that and extrapolate out and use those as disease models to maybe help people here on the ground with osteoporosis, vestibular problems, neurovestibular problems, nervous growth issues, all kinds of different things. So it's important. It's important research, and it continues.
That's great. Barbara, this one's for you. I'm going to combine it with another one from Susan from Calabasas. Wants to know how difficult it was to be selected as the citizen during the Citizen in Space program, during the Teacher in Space program. And then Timothy from Sussex is asking, do you think space tourism will really take off in a big way? So you came into NASA as not as an astronaut, wound up becoming a NASA astronaut. How difficult was that? And what do you think about the future for civilian travel?
Well, let's go to the civilian travel first if we can. I am really excited, and I think I speak for all of us on this. We are so excited about the partnerships that we have now, the private, public-private partnerships. So our companies like SpaceX and Boeing and others who are working with NASA, and we now have, we've had our first flight, a commercial crew flight with our NASA astronauts flying to the International Space Station on SpaceX's Dragon. And we think that's gonna open up so many doors for more and more people to fly into the future. And I look forward to that time when many, many, many more people can experience space. And to me, the most important reason for that is when you can get outside, when you can get a different perspective, for example, being outside of the Earth's atmosphere, 250 miles up, looking back at our planet and seeing it from a different perspective. We all think that if everybody saw that perspective, we just might get along a lot better here on the planet.
And how about for you, how difficult was the process to get in as a citizen?
Well, there were thousands and thousands of great teachers all over the country who applied for the Teacher in Space program. NASA chose the most wonderful person in the world, my friend Krista McAuliffe, to be our first and forever Teacher in Space. And there were a lot of great teachers. We were all pleased. It was one of these things like where we got together and we got to meet each other. It was during a really tough time for education. A national report called A Nation at Risk had come out at that time saying how terrible our public education system was. There was a saying at the time that said, those that can do, those that can't teach. It was loud and in our faces. And it was a really tough time for education. And I will be forever grateful to NASA for doing the Teacher in Space program, because Crystal is such a great representative of great teachers all over the country. It turned around a really negative view of the importance of public education in this country. So that's what I'd like to say about that.
That's great.
And I think for all of us, now even more so, we have so many people applying to be astronauts. Everybody is highly qualified. We also get lucky to be able to be selected. And if any of our viewers are thinking that they would like to be astronauts, I would just say, do everything you can. If that's your dream, go for it. And don't let anything stop you. Just keep working really, really hard. Do the best you can, and then keep applying. Persistence and patience. Keep applying, keep applying.
She persisted. You're certainly someone who persisted, so good for you. We're going to take one more question and then we have to wrap it up, I'm afraid. Jack, this one I'm going to give to you. This is from Lawrence in Reno. Wants to know how private ventures in space have helped NASA. Just give us a quick rundown on where we are in the private public partnership with NASA and space right now.
You bet. So and I'll try to be really brief on it. There's obviously the commercial crew program that you've heard of with SpaceX and Boeing that are doing flights to the space station. That was the follow-on to the commercial payload program, basically where we were bringing commercial cargo up to the space station through orbital, Boeing, and SpaceX as well. We have a lot of capability going to the station for those commercial services. We also have a new company called Axiom that got rights to the front end of the station. So kind of the hood ornament, if you will, of the space station. They're going to have a commercial space station and expand those services. And then you have companies like Blue Origin with the new Shepherd vehicle that is going to do tourism flights and science flights, suborbital. You have Virgin Galactic that has those same type of flights. So it's really a burgeoning industry right now. Lots of opportunities, and that's why, as Bonnie said, there's just going to be so many more opportunities for people interested in space and getting to space through different means, not just NASA. You don't have to wear the blue jacket anymore to get to space. There's going to be a lot of opportunities for people to explore and evolve the species. So pretty exciting time to be alive.
Pretty exciting time to be alive. What a nice way to end this. The four of you are wonderful. I think we could probably talk for 3 more hours, and I know there's a lot more questions. I'm sorry we didn't get to all of them. I want to thank the four of you, not only for your service and what you have done for us as Americans, as citizens of this planet, but also for all the great work you do in terms of outreach and talking up the glories and the excitement of space. And I'm going to throw it to the Viking godmother and let Anna say goodbye to everybody.
Well, I'd just like to say thank you so much to my friends, Barbara, Rick, and Two Fish for participating, and you, Lynn, for agreeing to host this. I really want to thank Viking, Mr. Hagen and Corinna Hagen for inviting me to be the godmother. I've learned so much from this experience and had just a wonderful time getting to share that with my friends. One of the things we didn't talk about too much today is just the international cooperation that it took to build the International Space Station. And I would have to say that although going into space was probably the highlight of my career, getting to be chief of the space station branch and working with our international partners to make this amazing structure that we built and learning to work together just showed me the value and all of us that work together of international cooperation. And you certainly see that on Viking ships with all the different internationals working together. I remember I challenged Mr. Hagen at the float out ceremony for the Orion that I hope someday that we'll see cruise ships in space. So all these tourists that we were talking about can look down at this beautiful planet of ours, and maybe we'll all learn to get along a little better. So I'm sorry that the pandemic makes it such that we're all having to do all of this remotely, but I'm sure we're going to solve that soon and get back to exploring, because it's really fun to see the Earth from space. It's an amazing view, but I was really hoping to spend some of my retirement getting to explore the world up close. And so I'll be very glad when the pandemic is over and we can resume our traveling like we did before. And again, just thank you to everyone, and hope you enjoyed the short time we had together. Thanks.